Phil, welcome to the show.
Hi, Aydin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited to do this. So, why don't we start from the beginning? I mean, you and I have known each other for a bunch of years, but you've been in the tech space for a long time,
hmm
and you run a company called Recollective. But maybe just tell everybody else a little bit about your background. What you all do at Recollective, and why you've been playing with AI.
Yeah, great. So I've been in the industry building online tools for a long time, like even since right after I got out of school and university. I'm not an engineer, but learned business and just loved technology and saw the wave that was coming back in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is when we were using Nokia phones and Mosaic browsers, so it was very early days. But you saw the tidal wave coming of web-enabled apps, and so we got into that space, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and ended up really focusing a lot on building tools around community and collaboration, which led us ultimately to build Recollective, which was kind of another pivot of the organization in around 2010, 2011, where we focused on building tools for market researchers to do qualitative research so that we could help companies learn from their customers and gain insights. So it's been a great adventure kind of getting connected with organizations all over the globe who do market research and larger brands who want to get kind of closer to customers and learn from them. So it's kind of been an interesting nut to crack. Quantitative research, as you know, had been online for a while, qualitative less so, and we saw an opportunity there.
We have that in common in that, my last company was also in quasi like customer research place. We had an online survey tool, so very quantitative. But of course, the best we did on the qualitative side was if there was a text box question where people could type freely. Yeah, but you guys go very deep. You're focused on qualitative, and I think these days you even have some quantitative survey type stuff built into the platform too, right?
Yeah, I think there's a blend always of qualitative and quantitative kind of coming together. They each serve their purpose. Of course, we're trying to focus more on the hows and whys people behave, but hybrid style research where people are using both methodologies makes a lot of sense. And the same goes for collecting data in an asynchronous manner versus interviewing people in a synchronous manner. You want to have the flexibility as a researcher to kind of use any number of tools within the one platform to kind of achieve your objective.
Yeah, totally. And I think the qualitative stuff is really interesting, and it feels like that can be like the exact sort of thing that you might want to use AI for, right? So
Yeah.
how are you guys thinking about that and incorporating it into the product?
Yeah, it's a good question. You're absolutely right that one of the things that has made qualitative research less attractive at times or more scary for people to get into is that it yields a lot of unstructured data. And then lo and behold comes the AI revolution, which is absolutely fantastic at taking unstructured data and making sense of it, extracting insights, finding patterns. And, a traditional qualitative market researcher literally would, in the old days, would record a focus group, have a transcript, trying to code and find themes. That was a lot easier online, but certainly AI has meant kind of a revolution for Recollective because we can now bring that to the platform to make it a lot easier to do things like the analysis side.
Yeah. This is one of the questions that we always ask on the show, which is, how has AI impacted your company? And so maybe since we're talking about your product, this is probably, I don't know, like we had this at Fellow where we had this holy shit wake up moment. I think that we need to, like, our product needs to drastically change because AI changes everything. We have these new building blocks. It's almost like if we had product market fit before, we're not going to have it anymore because AI changes everything. And so we just had to like literally reinvent the company. I don't know what it was like for you guys. Like how has it impacted your company, would you say?
It was definitely a lot of pressure. I think when, ChatGPT gained momentum and people saw what was possible, like you said, the fit you have starts to erode if you don't react to that opportunity. And there was, huge pressure from our customer base to know what our AI strategy would be and how it would get folded into what we're doing. So, rather than it necessarily impacting the way we did our business, it definitely changed how we had to strategize around the business. And we had made commitments and had a roadmap and largely had to shift gears just like you did to figure out how to incorporate it and bring it into the platform. So we as an engineering team and a product team had to really learn exactly how to implement these tools and how to get them to scale and bring them into the platform kind of in a useful way.
Yeah. So this is one of the beliefs I have, which is that every company needs to transform themselves. And I think AI impacts different companies in different timeframes. In some cases, it's very obvious. Like I feel the space that we were in, very obvious that you'd want to use AI. And I think like there's, for you guys as well, AI can do a lot. How did you go about transforming the company? What were the series of steps that you did? I mean, again, it's a pretty big move to say, hey, our old roadmap is gone, and now this is the new roadmap. How did that play out? Like just play by play. And the reason I'm asking is, again, I feel like this is useful for every single company out there because everybody needs to, wake up and make some changes. So if you were to maybe tell us what your roadmap was and how you went about doing it, then I think a lot of others could learn from it too.
Well, certainly it was having to get familiar with exactly what was possible. I think we're very busy engineering the product already, so there is almost limited cycles, but you really had to carve out time for the team to learn the fundamentals of how the LLMs work. What's a vector database? How do you apply this? Where are the right applications within the software itself? So there was definitely a period of experimentation and learning. And that had to happen on the engineering side, but also on the product side. So that was just a function of exposure, being students of the technologies, creating space to do some experimentation.
How did you create the space?
Yeah, it's a function of reprioritizing. This is where we did get cornered, is that we had made certain commitments about features that we wanted to have on our roadmap, which put us behind in terms of timeline. I would have loved to have shifted the whole business towards that opportunity when AI kind of revealed itself, but we had those commitments. And so we had to use some of the time, even though we were moving forward on those non-AI commitments, we could spend the time learning and sharing among the team how this technology would come together. I would take the lead, certainly learning about things and try to create a shared knowledge base with the team, but it needed cycles from our CTO and others to get their head around it, to know where to take it. And so part of it was learning on the job and cutting our teeth on the first few tools. We looked at our product. There's aspects of setting up research, there's aspects of moderating it as it happens, and there's the analysis. The analysis was the obvious piece that took the most time and where the most value could be extracted. So we just laser focused on the smallest part of that, which would include things like easy wins like summarization, extracting key themes, and so on. And then we had moved progressively, starting simple. I think that's the toughest part. Just start simple, put something out, get some feedback. And so we released a way to ask questions, and it couldn't do comparative analysis well. And then we layered that in. So we just incrementally listened to our customers and kept adding more as we went along. And we focused primarily on that analysis side initially, and that's led to some good success.
So one of the things I hear these days is I want to incorporate more, and I'm a proponent, and but I just get a lot of resistance from my team. Did you get any resistance, and how did you deal with it?
Not so much resistance. I think we just had plans and had commitments, and it was really just trying to make sure that we allocated, like you said, make the space for people to go and learn. And, that's obviously not idle time. That was an important discovery time for us to figure out exactly how we wanted to take this technology and put it into Recollective, at least for those initial steps. And the rest kind of becomes not more obvious, but the opportunities, once you have the base technology, you start to understand, okay, we have a lot of volume of data in Recollective across global customers in many languages. So, the tool itself isn't excessively complicated, but doing it at the scale that we were doing it is where it was kind of more daunting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're going to show some cool things that you built into Recollective in a bit. How else did AI impact the other parts of your company?
Yeah, I think it's probably not too different from some other organizations. You're looking for those easy wins early on where where AI can have huge productivity gains around research or content generation, more recently now doing analysis of the data we have already, really trying to leverage what data we had and figuring out where there were opportunities. So part of that has been just trying to even just educate and enable our team members to understand where AI comes into play, what tools do they have available to them, and upskilling them so they know how to prompt and even how to use it. So having to get that kind of knowledge out there was an important first step. Again, everyone's busy, heads down, working in their respective departments. So it was figuring out how to expose them to it. It's leading a little bit more by the tech. Hey, here's what the tech can do. And now you're focusing and turning it around, saying, okay, well, what are the biggest opportunities? And then how do we apply that to kind of move the business forward in a more productive way?
Yeah, and are there examples of one place where it has worked well in the business?
Yeah, I think with one of the things especially on the sales front, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of data around contacts in our CRM. There's a lot of leads. Our SDR team is collecting huge lists. And so just going through those systematically to categorize those leads or create some custom outreach for them has yielded some immediate gains. And being able to even just tap into some of the content we have, like we are, recording our calls, or we've got customer support information in our CRM. There's insights and knowledge kind of hiding in there that normally you wouldn't dream of even being able to access. But if you can kind of bring that data back to your side of the fence, you could start to do some analysis and, pluck out some product feedback from sales calls that you wouldn't normally rewatch.
Basically, grabbing those insights and then feeding it to the product team and making that more automated and just something that happens all the time versus happens some of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's the unstructured data you have in your own organization is a wealth of information that it's kind of largely had been untapped. Obviously some vendors were letting you start to do that with some of the data, but being able to bring and combine some of your data to get kind of a whole picture on your account is, I think, some big opportunities. I think we're still working on how to do that and how to enable different team members in different departments to kind of really up their productivity. I think everyone's using it in a slightly different way, and it's uneven at this point, but I think getting them to adopt it more widely to help them move forward is kind of what I've been championing as well. So that may be unlocking different assistants that are knowledgeable about the product or whatever the case may be to help them move forward more quickly.
One of the things that you were telling me about before was you were using AI for lead scoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could maybe dig into just so that people have an idea of what can be done, what you're doing on lead scoring, and also who led the initiative for that.
I think we started off by exposing our team members, especially on the sales side and kind of strategic business side, around some of the tools that we had to do even just basic data enrichment. So we use a tool called Relay, which is kind of like a Zapier, and it's got these AI steps. And so we were able to take things like raw data we had in Sheets and enrich that data with either data from the web or from our CRM. And quickly we're starting to think, okay, well, if I can do this over hundreds or thousands of rows, then this is where it is coming from more the sales department in terms of having the idea of I would love to, for example, categorize our accounts based on some new definitions. And so how do we do that effectively? I've got some of the data in CRM, but I need to go maybe get a company profile online. Are they a marketing research agency or are they a marketing agency in terms of developing, media collateral? So we had to distinguish who those are and try to even size them. So it was a lot of just this kind of trial and error. So we would come in, take the data, and we would figure out using these tools, is it good to do a web search for this? Are we using a Perplexity model? And we would try and get the data. It turned out often that the data that was already in the model was actually very good in terms of trying to assess if this was a global, multi-market firm or not, and then categorize them. Where we got into the whole lead scoring, I don't even know if we call it scoring, but it was kind of like looking at the leads and recent interactions with them and the chatter in Salesforce and making an assessment as to the degree to which they were kind of a warm lead before, then helps us prioritize who to recontact.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it seems like you expose some tools to the team, And then by having the team see those tools, they got more ideas around, well, can we also use it to do these other things? And then who is responsible for implementing that? Did you, for example, have someone who is more like a sales operations person, or did it come back to the engineering team? Did it come back to you?
Yeah,
Like, who
sometimes.
ended up solving the problems?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix. Sometimes it's me. I've been trying to kind of empower the operations teams more, but I was been kind of one of my goals has been trying to find tools where the kind of everyday non-technical person can really leverage it. So it's got a friendly interface. A lot of the AI tools are more developer focused, I find, or they're lacking a good kind of front end experience. So trying to find tools that work within the platforms they're used to. So if you're working in Google Sheets and you want to do AI there, how do I enable you to do that? And we just focused on kind of doing some enablement and sessions and teaching them how to use the tool and then being there as a resource. And for a number of months, I would have almost like a power hour session twice a week, and it was kind of open office hours. If you got a need that's AI related, drop in. We'll try and debug some of these things together. And sometimes that led to projects that we worked off offline, but it was really taking the few people who understood AI, of which I spent probably the most time out of anybody, to say, look, I'm available as a resource. Tell me what your needs or problems are, and then let's just try and create those together.
I love that idea. Just the idea of AI office hours.
Yeah.
That is that's a really cool. First time I've heard that. So that's an awesome approach. So I would love to know, because you said, you spend a bunch of time learning and keeping up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can walk us through, how do you keep up to date?
At the beginning, it was tougher because you would find out about different trends and tech, but there was so much information now being consolidated. I think one of the great resources you can go to is just online newsletters. There's one I like called The Rundown. ChatGPT or GPT releases an agent operator. You're going to find out about it within 24 hours. What I found most useful was just experimenting, like getting in, logging in, create an account. There's always usually some free credits or a free trial. Go try it. See what it's like. Even as a product manager designer, I think seeing how AI interfaces are coming about and what that interaction model looks like has been useful, because we can bring that to our own product. And then you start to see the differences, between, is this more dev focused? Is this no code, low code? Is this something I could give to my employees? And also trying to find solutions where, because again, I said it's very uneven in terms of people's adoption of AI. So I don't want to just blanket everyone with a ChatGPT Plus subscription. It's not cost effective. And I don't want to pay for AI in Notion and in Slack and in Salesforce. And I'm just going to double my SaaS costs. So just trying to be smart about what are some general purpose tools that everyone could leverage, especially that aren't seat-based, and then try to disseminate those as widely as possible. The adoption's not always great, but it's like, I'm trying to just put it in the hands of our team. And so what we have in our intranet, we have a Notion intranet, and I have an AI productivity section, and all the kind of the key tools that anyone could log into and use. Could be Google AI Studio, which you would have never heard of because it's kind of a more dev tool, but it's in fact very useful. And now that we have things like Gemini baked into Workspace, what about that? How do I use that? Can I do analysis in Google Sheets? How am I even going to know as a regular employee that that's now possible because it changed last month? So you're right, it does take a lot of time to kind of read and share it, but then using channels like Slack to say, we have an artificial intelligence channel where we're like saying, hey, here's what's new. And if it's very specific, I want to get the engineering term to try the cursor and IDE, then it's like, hey, here's this new thing. They're doing very well. Maybe we should look at this. So it's just trying to disseminate that and encourage people to find time for it. But it's been a small team. It's largely me and just a few people who are connected to monitoring who are really sharing that information out.
Yeah, you said a bunch of super interesting things. I'm just going to highlight them because I find them fascinating. You, in passing, said, especially if they're not per seat tools,
Mm-hmm.
which is super interesting. It's just like a sign of where software is going. Moving more and more away from per seat pricing. And it is true. Like if you pay for AI on Slack and in Notion and in everything else, then you're doubling all of your SaaS costs. And so that is an implication. And yeah, maybe like the immediate way to look at that is, oh, it doubles my SaaS costs. And I think that kind of maybe hints at we're still not at the place where the ROI from all the AI that, the various tools have baked in is so obvious where people are like, oh yeah, I would just do
Mm.
that. And it does have a lot of experimentation. Like you said,
Hmm.
you can read it in a newsletter. And I think that's a good place to start, to give you an idea of what new things there are. But there's nothing like experimenting and tinkering for you
Yep.
to really understand what's going on and how it might apply to you. I don't know, Phil, if you find this too. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could do that.
Mm.
But you're never going to get those ideas unless you experiment and like fool around and try some things that don't end up working.
Yeah, you're right. I think even just the technology is so empowering and fast changing that even thinking about what's possible, a couple of years ago you wouldn't even fathom them. So you're right. Like you do wake up in the morning thinking, God, you know what? I had seen this other tool. I experimented with it in this use case, but now I have this other data. I wonder if these two can come together and do something for a particular team. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of these kinds of epiphanies, but yeah, you're right. You have to see more and try more to even get some of those ideas. And on the point around the seat versus consumption model, I was debating this with a friend the other day where I think you're right. The ROI, you're not sure because they're early and you don't know if it's going to be uniformly used or benefiting everybody. So this is where it's like it gets prohibitive. If I don't want to buy 100 seats only to have 15 people use it regularly. So this is where consumption-based might win for a while. But I think once the costs of the AI are so much lower and people's adoption is kind of more uniform, I could see it still going back to seat-based in the sense that the pendulum might swing back to, look, we have a vertical AI solution. You want this for your, sales development team. So, you're going to be paying based on how many people are managing that or how much the agent is doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, okay, so that's how you keep up to date with AI. Like, how has it changed your day-to-day work? Like, what's different about how you go about your day because of AI?
Yeah, I find that you can be a lot more self-reliant. Like probably one of my favorite subscriptions that I do have is Perplexity Pro. I love Perplexity. It's just a great starting point. I find I go there first more than a lot of other tools. And I'm usually just exploring ideas or concepts and trying to refine those and looking, to blend or compare different, say different concepts. So I'm not just searching just for definitions. I'm looking, I'm doing analysis with these kinds of tools where I would have normally perhaps, grabbed my CTO for 15-minute call to learn or unpack something that I'm trying to understand. I can go to these tools now because you have almost like these infinite set of experts, if you will, at your disposal. And so it's just a function of you deciding to ask and being curious enough to ask. So I find a lot of my own exploration of these things starts with AI now. I'm going to Perplexity. I'm exploring a part of, maybe it's a new market research concept I'm not that familiar of. I want to get familiar with it, see if there's implications for me. Or there's a new AI tech and it sounds a lot like another one. How do they compare? Being able to do that and do that quickly means I'm just getting the information I need to kind of make decisions and move forward a lot more quickly.
So I just want to dive into this example a little bit more, just to give people an idea. So you said you're more self-reliant, and if you want to explore a concept, you start there first. And this is important, and I kind of want to highlight this because a lot of, call it, distractions in the workplace, they're productive distractions, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
people pinging each other for information, and there's this whole "let me Google that for you"
Yeah.
type of site that used to exist, and so now, but now it's just a lot more powerful. And so Googling things would take a long time, but now you can explore things on your own. And I do think that this reduces the collaboration tax that might exist within companies because these tools do make you more self-reliant. But what's an example of a time you started by exploring on Perplexity versus going straight to the expert on your team?
Well, I mean, ironically, a lot of it is around AI. Sometimes different models and technologies come out, and you're trying to understand the implications and applications of them. Might be very specific technologies where, maybe we're trying to do something real time in our application. I don't quite understand what some of the limitations are or costs. And so you can start to explore what people are saying about different technologies or approaches. And that's been really useful. And there's so much knowledge out there, even around your industry and your competitors. So if I haven't heard of a particular competitor, I want to know where they're from, what are their strengths, how are people reacting to them, what are the reviews about them. That's great. I don't have to go to the marketing department and say, hey, have you guys come across ABC competitor and how do we compare here? Is this similar to XYZ? I just ask myself, and quickly, if I find there's relevance there and I'm thinking, okay, this is really interesting for us or for somebody, then I can actually just share the thread, the conversation I just had with Perplexity and say, hey, take a look at this. So it still leads to collaboration and knowledge sharing, but you kind of have this base before you meet. And Perplexity does let you save those. You can group into a space. And you can collaborate on that if you want. So it's great for those early exploratory pieces. And it's tech and marketing and industry. It's a little bit everywhere.
Yeah, that's super cool, and very, very interesting workflow around then taking a conversation and then sharing it with your team after. It's almost like you start the conversation with AI, further it, and then when it's further along, you can loop in others too. So, yes, super interesting. So we talked about a bunch of ways that AI has impacted the company, some ways it's impacted your way of work. What are you thinking of showing and telling today?
Well, I've got a few things I could show you. I can show you a little bit about how AI has appeared inside Recollective in terms of people being able to ask open-ended questions of their data. And I could show you some of the tools that we use to expose some of the data we have internally, because again, we have great data on websites and inside our Google Drive, so making those more accessible has been key. And I could also show you some of the various tools we've got around how we build some of these workflows that are AI kind of enriched. So this is Recollective. Excuse the colors. This is just a demo site that we have. So in Recollective, what you can do is you are usually engaging people for days, sometimes weeks, over multiple activities, and you're collecting a lot of unstructured data like we talked about. Could be text, could be video, could be photo, all kinds of things. And we are learning about people based on their responses. And of course, we know things about them, such as what segments they're in and so on. And so what we had added was this Ask AI capability, almost as a tab here to the software, because regardless of where participants expressed their responses, it could be activities and in discussions and live meetings, we wanted to give you a central place where you could ask open-ended questions about it. So you're able to filter on the different activities if you want, or you can ask broad-based questions across the base, filter on different segments of people or even specific people. And so you ask a question. I'll just bring up some that I've got from the chat history. So we asked, what types of food are people willing to go over budget on in this grocery study? And so it goes through. And what was key here was to give researchers confidence that this, like Perplexity, is grounded in actual facts. And so we focused a lot on providing a list of the verbatims or quotes on which these are based so that you knew that this was not hallucinating or dreaming up these responses. And so it gives you a very good, concise answers and a conversation interface, just like you'd expect, so that you can continue to ask probing questions around this subset of data. And again, I could have focused just on the journal that everyone completed last week and unpack what had happened and what people thought and how they behave. And if I click on the verbatims, I can see exactly who said it, the relevant quote in the larger piece of text, and I can always go to that specific quote because I may want to save that as part of the evidence or story I'm going to tell in my final report.
Yeah, that's super cool. It's Perplexity for your
Yeah,
qualitative
your own research. Like, I think, I mean, at Recollective, we really think that the relationship you have with your customers and the human beings that represent your stakeholders is going to matter even more. And that's a relationship you're going to want to own and control and not have that mediated through someone else.
yeah.
And as things get more generic in AI insights, these unique human insights that you went and got through primary research are going to be even more important.
So for people who are thinking, okay, this is really cool, clearly better than the previous way this was done, which is I assume just regular text-based search, maybe.
Yeah, and just hand coding, highlighting relevant things, and so on.
So how has, like, from your customer base, like, how many people are now using this? Like, is this the primary thing people are using?
Yeah. Yeah, this has become an anchor, a core aspect of the software experience now, certainly on the analysis side. So being able to collect the data, not even worry as much about, I mean, you still want to structure it well, but you're getting all of this unstructured data tagged to people, and those people are in particular segments, and you know if the data is fresh or not, because these are the studies that you're running on an active basis. So being able to interrogate that data freely with natural language is a total game changer for qualitative research. And having it baked into the platform so you don't have to export this and bring it to some sort of post-study analysis, you get to do it right here. It means that you can inform your research as it's happening, as the data is coming in, and then you might pivot your research and change the nature of your next question or activity based on what you're learning. And doing it in platform hacking is really what was key.
Yeah, super cool. Again, this is a great example because you guys existed before AI tools were available and you were able to make these huge adjustments. Your customers were demanding it, and now it's like an anchor way of using the product.
I think we're lucky, to your point earlier, that it's not always obvious where to bring it in, and depending on how regulated your industry is, there may be concerns, but being able to be in qualitative research in the business of collecting unstructured textual data and videos is so dovetailed perfectly into what AI has been good at from day one that it was a kind of an obvious win for us.
Yeah, love it. Very, very cool.
And I'll show you one more thing. So, in terms of evolution, one of the things that we like to do is that you can like @mention people, but you can also @mention segments of people. So you'd be like, how did the men and women feel differently about a particular thing? So we're doing all these extra steps in the background to say, well, let's go and get how the men think about this. Let's go get how the women think. And then we do a comparative analysis for you. And you can mention up to like 10 segments and get a full breakdown of what the similarities are, the differences. The difficulty of doing this quickly in the past is just such a huge jump that it's just, like I said, it just really opens the door to what can be done. And it makes the content more accessible to the clients who aren't professional researchers, who have their own questions, who are the ones who are effectively funding the research, but all, less technical researchers or less researchers that aren't trained, in qualitative methods can be much more effective at doing this now.
Yeah, that's a really clever UI around tagging in segments. So one question that people might have is, so how do you, in order to make this a really good product and for you to be able to say, since you're trusting, like your customers are trusting that this, product's not hallucinating, it's saying, the things that are true that were cited in actual anecdotes, what are you doing in the background to make sure that doesn't hallucinate or that you have, things in place to test this product?
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of part of the secret sauce in the background is how you go and get those sources, put them in front of the model that's doing the analysis. Of course, in the prompting, you're making sure it's grounded, but there are extra verification steps to make sure that the verbatims do tie back to the answer. And we are rating the relevancy of those verbatims and presenting the most relevant ones at the top and making sure that those are used. So the way you rank it. So you're having the LLM and the models often self-checking. Like, is this actually related to the question and the answer that we gave? And is this an appropriate verbatim or quote that supports this? And being able to use that to increase the quality of the answer, but also highlight those was key, was to make sure that people saw the cited sources and could click on that to go read it in the broader context and also agree. I think you do more of that at the beginning because you're maybe not as trusting. But once you realize, hey, this is like pretty much right all the time, you stop looking at the sources and you just start to trust the output. And that comes over time.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so there is a lot of, for people building products here, it's not single shot prompts. There are multiple steps to this to producing
Yeah.
really good quality output.
Yeah, and it took a lot of trial and error. And my recommendation is to start simple. Start with a single prompt. You're probably going to produce some value. If it needs to be grounded in the data, I mean, obviously that's the part to focus on. Give people confidence it's not hallucinating, but you can get fancier, such as this comparative analysis and more filters as time goes on. You don't have to start there. And the only other thing I want to show you inside Recollective is that we have done also an area where we are looking proactively at each of the responses and trying to extract themes and categories, even the emotions that are expressed. But again, the LLM is just ripe for this. So just being able to tag this as it's coming in allows you to have a more of an exploratory part. So you don't know maybe what questions to ask yet. So this complements the AI questions. You're starting to see that there's a lot of frustration around the checkout experience. What is that about? You can zone in on that negative emotion and then go back to AI questions and go, okay, give me examples of the frustrations with the checkout process. But again, as you can see here, the verbatims, which are like the quotes, are kind of front and center here, so that if I go to pick a particular option, I'm going to see just the quotes that match that. So I can get a sense that, yeah, okay, this truly is frustration. I can read it plain in front of me.
Yeah, I love that. Like just the idea of being able to, go through a like text or video or audio and say, what were all the emotions that were expressed? And then use that to segment it the way that you did. That's clever. I like that.
And we're combining against, one of the things that Recollective lets you do is engage people asynchronously, like a survey, kind of do it at your time, but it's going to be much more open-ended. And I may be asking you to walk through a store with your camera on. And there's also synchronous meetings. So you can have one-on-one in-depth interviews and you can do live group chats. Those all just produce really lengthy, messy transcripts. How do you make sense of that? All of that data feeds into this one repository that you have access to in the context of this one study. And now you can interrogate it and focus in on just certain people, only situations where their emotions were negative, and so on and so forth.
What I love about this is because it makes it so much easier to do and faster, I just feel like a lot more of it is going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it makes it more accessible to people, like I said, the researchers who are on staff who maybe haven't done online qualitative research isn't their specialty, but they're consumer insights professionals maybe and others, and they want to do this directly. It becomes more accessible now.
Love it. Very cool.
One of the things I talked about is trying to use the tools that you have available to you. So we already have so much data. Like we're a Google Workspace customer, but I think it's the same if you live in the Microsoft Copilot world. You've got data all over these tools already. Google and Microsoft are providing tools to build little agents and searches. I would suggest to people to go leverage those. Those are the ones that are coming out of the box. I already have tens of thousands of files in Google Drive. Why would I try and reinvent the wheel? The danger here, of course, is that the data you have, it's usually a bit of a mess because you've got some stale data, some fresh data, but it's still, unlocking search is just a basic need, and doing it internally with AI is really fantastic. So in this case, this was just a demo I had built out where I could connect multiple sources, and it was sources specific to me. So it's my mail, my calendar, my version of Drive, but I can also have it index entire websites. So we have a multi-100-page knowledge base. I know, you guys spend a lot of time on good documentation. It's the same thing. Like it's an untapped resource. And then we have our obviously our marketing website as well. It's got tons of blog posts, how-tos, webinars. And so how do you make use of that? So we ended up creating this little Vertex search engine. This is just part of the Google Cloud platform. And we just added a shortcut. So if you go to recollective.com/ask, it only works internally and it redirects here. So I could say, for example, how does Recollective integrate with Qualtrics, which is something that we had added. And so it's going to go find all the sources that you can see there, integration guides, website content, and so on. But I'm getting now an AI generated answer, all with citations of exactly where these things come from. And so I can now grab that PDF, or I can verify that it's not the outdated version, and so on. And so this was a basic way to create one of those knowledgeable assistants with very little effort.
I mean, again, it's like an internal Perplexity.
Yes, like start with what you have already, and then you'll see that that doesn't work in all cases. Then you can innovate and create, variations on that.
Yeah, and so for people listening in, so we're going through some of these things quickly, but if you go to thisnewway.com, sign up for the newsletter, we're going to give you instructions on how you can set up your own Vertex AI search in the way that we saw here, and give you all the relevant links so that you can find those. But yeah, that's really cool. It just makes me think that documentation was important before.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more important now.
Yep.
So make sure that you're documenting.
Yeah, I would say I agree 100%. I think it's really underscored the need to have almost like knowledge gardeners in your workplace. Even maybe appointing someone in each team to say, look, that little corner of your world, which is say this part of Google Drive and Notion, you own this. Move the old stuff out, keep it fresh. And because especially if you're going to point AI to it as a knowledge source, it can't discern the same way a human can to know that that brochure was superseded by the next one. One thing says something is coming and now it's out. You wouldn't want your answer for a proposal or a customer-facing bot to say, we don't have this feature, when in fact you have it, or it's giving you the wrong instruction on how to use it. So this kind of tool here is good because you're going to have an internal operator. They can make the discernment as to, how good is this relative to my needs, but it saves them time.
And Phil, for people to set this up, just so that they have a sense, like, is this the sort of thing you can do in an afternoon? Like, was this?
Yep. This is something that's non-technical. Everything I'm going to show you today is absolutely no code, non-technical. So the toughest part here is you need to have a Google Cloud account. So that's something you need to sign up for and follow through the steps. And so the agent builder is the specific module, and you can create multiple apps. One of them is called a search. And then it just asks you, well, what's your data sources that you want to search? And when you say new data source, you get to pick. There's a lot here that looks scary. I don't understand what a big query table is. You don't need to. Just focus in on things like website content or focus in on Google Drive. And once you give it permission, it adds it as a data source. And then you get to go into the app itself and preview it. And they're showing it to you right here as you work. And you're like, yeah, okay, I see where this is going. And there's a few configuration options here. They're not that scary. They're just like, what model do you want to use? A prompt around the output, a couple switches. And again, you can keep testing this and see if it works for you. And you're ready to go. And then you can deploy this just internally.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, this is super cool. Yeah, thanks for showing it.
The other tool I really liked, we were a big Zapier customer, and Zapier is great and has the most integrations by far. But I really like this particular tool because of the ease with which you could add AI steps. You could just do a workflow like, hey, if a Google Sheet gets a new row, process it, do some stuff, write a cold email based on this guy's profile, and put it back in the sheet. Or maybe even put it in my email as a draft, and I'll send it later. Like the fact that you could connect a bunch of tools and do it in a non-technical way meant that I could empower my team to do this. And this is one where you could get a team license for $60 a month. Everyone gets a seat if they want. And now it's more a function of who's willing to spend a little bit of time learning how to use this than it being a barrier of, only some people have access to the tools. So let me show you some examples. So it's got a very friendly interface. So here's an example where we're processing leads again. So sometimes we might bring things out of other places, like maybe it's a dump from Salesforce and we put it in a sheet, but now we want to work it and do something with it. Maybe even goes back into Salesforce. So the fact that you can use everyday tools like a Google Sheet makes it very accessible. And so we are saying, hey, go over each of the rows, go create a summary of the following organization, use Gemini or use whatever model you want. Determine the account type. Here are some different types based on what you know. Would you put it as a type 1, a type 2, or type 3? Type 1 was like the main one that we like. Okay, if it's a type 1, you have like an if path. I want you to subcategorize this. Are they multinational? Are they just kind of like really small? And then, write all this back into the sheet so that I can know the account type, the category, the subcategory, mark it done. And I could do this. I could run it 600 times, and then we could do something else with that data. So this meant I had to learn Relay and maybe explain this to people, but ultimately I empowered them to do it. And then they go and do this without me at all now. So it's great.
I love it. And so Relay is, you find it has been better than Zapier for just interfacing with the AI agents.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of the ways it even connects to things like Salesforce, when you grab a failed Salesforce account, all the nested objects are related to it are already retrieved for you. And it's like a flyout menu. Oh, the case to the parent account, to the category, to the sales rep. Oh yeah, drop that in as a variable. And then so one of the things I have here as an example was, so here, this is a similar one, lead enrichment. So I'm grabbing a whole bunch of data in Salesforce, every email, every chatter thing that we did, things that we talked about with them. Look, now go find all the email messages that were sent out that were logged to Salesforce from a variety of different tools. And then use Perplexity to describe the company, use ChatGPT to look at all the chatter and go, what were kind of the blockers here? Maybe we want to re-engage them. See if it's still a fit, come up with a cold call script, and then write it all back to the sheet. And if we want to automate that more, bring that into outreach, or just have someone pick up the phone and call, they've got a script, a voicemail. They're only going to call the high fit ones, and they know without ever having opened Salesforce that they last talked to John, and it was because of this issue that they didn't buy last time, and we're wondering if they're still interested in re-engaging and getting a new demo.
Yeah, this is super cool. Again, it's like that you have this super motivated intern that never makes mistakes and doesn't get tired, and doesn't matter how many times you ask them to do this. It's incredible.
And the way I frame this is that you've got inputs and some actions and some output, right? So your inputs or givens is what's in the sheet or wherever you're pulling your data from. And then the actions is where the AI comes into play. And I say, if you just treat it like a person who just has no context, they don't understand your business, they don't understand your industry, you need to give it context. And you're saying, given this context and these inputs, make these determinations, classification, or read these emails and tell me what you think they're talking about. And then you get this structured output out. What's nice is that you're getting structured output. Every one of these AI steps, if I say I want a summary and a company description and a cold email, I get 3 things out of it. And I can just literally just drop those into extra cells in the Google Sheet. And so it's very intuitive to kind of work through that. It's not, and it's repeatable. You work literally with one row, keep working on the workflow. And once it works, test it on a few more. Seems to still be working. Okay, run it 600 times.
Yeah, incredible. Very cool.
And so a few more examples. This was a more enrichment. I have monitoring some industry sources. So we have industry news that comes in over RSS. Some of the sites don't even have RSS feeds, and so they're hard to scrape. So what I do is I scrape the data out and grab each of the articles that are relevant, and then I send them to like a shared one called article extractor. And it just goes and grabs all the text from the article. It classifies all the information. So I'm saying, give me the title, the URL, the posted date, the list of companies mentioned. Oh yeah, can you put them in the order of importance? Anyone who was mentioned, any products that were mentioned. And then I go and I hit Salesforce. Hey, have we done business with this particular company? How much revenue have we had with them last year? And then if it's relevant, we Slack it out into an industry news Slack channel. Hey, so-and-so just bought so-and-so. We've done 200,000 with them last year, and this was related to sales rep X. And so being able to do that with the news and stay on top of it, not only do we Slack it, we just dump it all into a Google Sheet. So you can just go and look for references of company X to see if they came up in the news recently because you're about to re-engage them.
Yeah, incredible. Again, you can see that your company can, again, this is how when you see, 100-person company acts like 1,000-person company.
Exactly. You total as a multiplier. So it's a function of just getting more people to do this, because this is still, even though it's no code, there's an intimidation factor here. Mm-hmm. It's a function of just trying simple things first. You're already massaging some sheet as an SDR. Well, wait, maybe there's a way that we can make that easier for you. Or you're an HR recruiter and you're in one particular entry level customer service job, you get like 200 applicants a week. Okay, well, what do you do with that? How can we automate that so it's a little bit less painful?
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool.
And then this was another one where I just built it recently because, you could buy tools in Slack to help you do daily stand-ups.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a tool like this. One of the things I like about Relay is it has this kind of human in the loop process where you can have it drafted email, Slack somebody and say, hey, is this okay? Or I need a bit of information from you. Get it? They never leave Slack. And then it would collect the data or they would approve it. And then it sends it out via their Gmail. And so you can do this. In this case, I go and get a list of team members, loop over them. Then I Slack them saying, hey, can you give me your daily update, what you worked on yesterday, today, if you have any blockers. It compares that to their previous updates, compiles it, summarizes it, posts it in a different channel, writes it to a sheet. And so you're using AI very strategically. So it's very deterministic in its process, but then you have these AI steps here and there where it makes sense.
Yeah, no, this is super cool. And just so people have an idea of cost, what is running these things, do you run up a crazy $10,000 bill a month
Nope.
to do these workflows?
Most of this costs $60 a month.
That's incredible.
And then
It's almost like, how is it so cheap?
I know. We got in early, so I probably have a more generous plan than they offer now, but still it's pretty generous. And one of the ways that you can cut the cost is in this particular tool, there's two consumables, is AI credits and how many steps you run. So the steps tend not to be a problem, but if you use their AI, you'll run out of AI credits. And so one of the things that they let you do is you can bring your own credentials. Yeah. So we just give everyone their own Perplexity key, Claude key, OpenAI key. And once you set that up once, you can use your own credentials. And when I look at the bill, like, oh, we spent $4.13 on that massive job. It's pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
But again, if I went and bought this at $8 a user US a month, a Notion times whatever, okay, you could do some interesting things in a Notion database, but you can't automate like this. And I'm out 16,000 extra on my SaaS bill.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge difference.
I'll show you this other tool. I highly recommend, if the more brave viewers or listeners, is that N8N is a tool like Relay where you can just weave some basic workflows together, but they've really integrated AI in a very smart way. And it's a different approach to doing it. So in this example, it looks like nodes where you can like move things around. So this is like, hey, anytime in this example, we get a review online, it gets moved into a sheet, or I maybe put it into the sheet. I want to assess the sentiment of it, and I want to write an intelligent comment to react. So it's literally take the new sheet, run an AI step, pump it back out to the sheet. And these endpoints could be anything. I could take data from one place and bring it to another place. And so being able to bring in AI anywhere you want is very powerful. This particular tool can get really fancy. So here's an example where, like I said, I'm just trying to control the data more. So we had data in a Gong, and we were leaving Gong behind and wanted to go, but I don't want to walk away from my call data, transcripts, videos. So how do you do that? So Relay could do this to some extent, but I found N8N is kind of a bit more robust for these bigger flows. And we were literally saying, look, we took a dump of the literally 4,400 calls we had in 2 years and said, look, loop over them, go into Gong, rip out, rebuild the transcript. Hey, you know what? Pass it to AI right now because I want to get product feedback and a few things that Gong never did for me. Take that out and then bring all this data back together. Hey, you know what? Put it all in the Salesforce right where it needs to be. And I also put it in another database so that I could do more work with it later. And it went through this and got all that data back out. So it doesn't matter if we don't have that service provider anymore. We have the data and control over it. And I've put it in one or more places and was able to do things like AI analysis as I'm migrating the data, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how you turn like a simple migration thing into a super valuable analysis function as well.
Yeah. So you don't have to you're not just transforming and loading data, you're actually looking at it as it passes over the wire.
Amazing. And it's really cool to see how complex this can get.
And then just one thing to note is if you're really getting into agents where the AI has a bit more autonomy to execute different tools, N8N is one of the great tools for this. You can just set up an AI agent node. You almost don't even need to put a prompt in here. You attach a model and you say, oh, I want to use GPT-4 mini. And then there's a few tutorials that walk you through this. And then you just keep adding tools. You're like, oh, I'd love if this agent could talk to my calendar. So I can go and attach the Google Calendar tool. So you would just say, here are my credentials, and you attach the calendar tool, and you can keep adding tools. So when you chat with this, you could say, hey, when's my next meeting with Aydin? It knows, oh, I got to use the calendar tool. It's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you reschedule it and move it an hour? Yeah, and it can do that. So you can imagine some of the processes you could automate this way because you have this more agentic flow where it's making a determination as to which tools to use and how often, and it goes back and forth to the model and then only answers you in the chat later saying, yep, meeting rescheduled.
Yeah, it's insane that you can build your own agents in this way. And this is super cool. And again, for everyone in the audience, we'll have more descriptions about how to do these things and some links to some of the tools Phil mentioned, so you can go and explore them for yourselves. But just this notion that you did all of this and you're able to do it for, call it sub $100 a month.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah, this is like, it's 25 to 50 euros a month for this service, unlimited seats. And then things like, I wanted to show you two tools that everyone might be familiar with is that, OpenAI has a playground area that not everyone maybe knows about. You can sign up at platform.openai.com, and it more or less gives you access to what is powering ChatGPT and the GPTs, but it's a little bit more of a developer experience, but it's actually very friendly, and it's easy enough, again, to provision this to as many people who want access to it. And so we can go in and build custom prompts. I took, for example, all the product feedback from those 4,000 calls, and I just put them in a sheet and just PDF'd it, printed it out, attach it as knowledge, write a prompt. You don't even have to be a good prompt writer anymore. You can hit this little button here and it says, hey, can you improve this prompt to make it better? AI fixes that. And now I've got an agent that is talking to a bunch of PDFs that I had provided, which literally has 4,000 call summaries in it. And I can say, hey, what did people like about the Recollective AI features? Of course, I'd probably ask something more constructive, like, how could we improve X, or who's complaining about ABC? What are the opportunities to do this or that? And I'm pulling data from that would have been trapped in those recordings. And this is like a meta-analysis because I'm actually querying the extracted product feedback from those calls en masse to answer this particular question. And this is, again, no cost, so to speak. This is literally pennies because I'm just doing it within. I don't have to provision a $30 a month seat to everybody for this.
Yeah. Super, super cool.
And then if you're a Google Workspace user, definitely Notebook LM, which you get the Notebook LM Plus version. Mm-hmm. If it's a great tool, again, where you can just provide sources, including YouTube videos, PDFs, documents, Google Docs, website pages. It doesn't do whole websites, unfortunately, but maybe that will come. And then I get to, again, attach that as sources. And now I can have the same conversation I just had there with the OpenAI platform. These are exactly the same files. And I get to query that same data. And again, I can click on this to go see where those sources are and which call it relates to. And so I can learn from it because I've just unlocked my own content. This is like the least technical. This is just grab some knowledge, CSV made into PDFs or into text files, drop them into the left panel, wait a second, start asking questions.
Love it. Which one do you like better, this or the playground for OpenAI?
It's a good question. This is one of the few times where I've tried to rebuild exactly the same assistant in both to see what the quality of the answers are. I haven't done a thorough analysis. I do find Notebook tends to be a little bit more thorough and more quick at providing the answers. And so two other ways we've used Notebook LM is that we do a lot of teaching internally as to how marketing research works. What is qualitative research? A lot of the people we hire aren't market researchers, but they're having to sell it, support it, and so on. And so we do a bunch of internal sessions where we teach almost like a 101 course. How do you do concept testing? What is qual? How does it differ from quant? And so this is something all employees kind of have to go through. And so, but each of those 1 hour sessions is just a treasure trove of information. They're the very valued time of our experts in front of a class, so to speak, but I've captured that as a transcript. And I have these other resources that they have found useful. Again, I can just take all that and dump all of those sessions and even some of the webinars we give online to teach people how to use Recollective, put it all into this notebook. And now I can say, hey, how do you do concept tests within Recollective? And it will go and look at all of those resources. And those resources weren't made for this. I wasn't trying to build a cool knowledge repository for an AI. This is like almost incidental value. And then, of course, with OpenAI Notebook LM, you get this audio output. So I could even create a 10, 12-minute podcast episode on the values of qualitative research and make it, mandatory listening for everyone as part of their onboarding.
Yeah, and it becomes so much more entertaining to listen to it as a podcast. There's just something about conversational format that is easier to digest.
For sure. And then there was one, our sales enablement manager had found a database of great go-to-market experts on LinkedIn, and someone had compiled all their posts and wisdom, and it was like way more than you can ever read. You know what it's like. It's like the LinkedIn fire hose. There are all these great thought leaders, and they're sharing interesting insights, but I don't know about you, but I don't have time to read that or analyze it. So we just took that database that we acquired and put it all into Notebook LM. And now I can say, hey, what are some of the most powerful LinkedIn features that very few people know about, or something like that? And there are suggested questions. And I'm effectively looking over 10,000 LinkedIn posts from just 16 experts.
Yeah, that's insane. That's really cool.
And so this can be a great enablement tool. Beyond that, I wanted to point out that Google AI Studio, which I definitely recommend you link out to to the listeners, is just a great place to play with. It's almost like the OpenAI Playground. It's where you can test the latest and greatest that Google's offering. And often, if you want to do things like analyze PDFs that are really big, you have to be in the paid tiers for those products. Google AI Studio is completely free. So you can hit the plus, you can attach large files, videos, audio, transcribe them. I uploaded once a video that one of our developers, he makes these great music videos. And I uploaded his music video and I said, give me a scene by scene breakdown like it's a storyboard. And it literally watched the video and watched like man at bar, woman enters from the right, like it sees everything. So you're not just transcribing audio, it has visual and multimodal capabilities. It is free. And you can give this to all your 100 employees at no charge. And there are ways of doing advanced prompting. You can go to stream real time and talk to it just like you would the advanced ChatGPT mode. There is now the ability to use the thinking models, but also some that do image generation. So here's my example. I said, this came out literally like last week. Let me go here. So I said here, hey, generate an image of a Ferrari parked in front of Parliament Hill. Gives me this. I said, oh yeah, make it a bright summer day. Gives me a modification. Oh yeah, make the road wet and reflective so it looks cool. All right, add some clouds. Hey, make it yellow.
Yeah.
It's nuts. I mean, these aren't images you're going to use for marketing purposes yet, but it's a chance for you to experiment with the technology and see how it can work and expose your team and your developers to what's possible in an environment where it's fast experimentation.
No, this is great, Phil. This is a lot of demos. So thank you for taking the time to show it to us and doing all it looks like you did a bunch of prep and had a bunch of these things ready in advance. This is incredible. I think everybody's probably, it felt like drinking from a fire hose. There are so many different things. But like you said, just starting with one basic thing. So we'll list out the use cases and even if you pick one use case and start there, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, just start simple. Obviously, if you can start with an actual need you have in your business, that's going to make it much more real. Work with the stakeholder who has the information, because usually someone's got that data, and say, okay, let's bring this data into a place where we can work with it. And if nothing else, it could be a PDF attached to a ChatGPT, and you're asking it questions and you're showing people what's possible. Then you can get into things like, okay, I need to do this, but I need to do this a lot of times. How do you do this 200 times? That's where some of those workflow tools can come in. And it's a function of just, again, starting simple and doing it. And it's not as intimidating as it looks. And that's what I've been focusing on, just finding tools that are affordable, that we can get out to people, and that they can learn to use on their own. And you don't have to rely on just a small group of people in the business who know how to work.
Yeah.
They are,
I love it. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I look forward to watching more of your episodes. And because part of what I need to do beyond newsletters and learning is learning how other people do it and collaborating with other business owners and managers and leaders to figure out how they're leveraging it, because there's new and novel ways all the time. And so we're constantly learning.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.